are more audience, those who are sitting in the adjoining conference hall. We have two more conference hall where around 300 people are watching this program live. It's a great honor and privilege to have amongst us an eminent scientist of the country, Dr. Anil Kakodkar ji, on the occasion of second lecture of Jashwant Inspirational Lecture Series. Jashwant Inspirational Lecture Series was inaugurated by none other than Dr. Raghunath Ji Mashilkar, another eminent scientist of India. He also delivered the first lecture of this inspirational series. CMI, Astha Foundation, and MIT have joined hands together for today's program, and it is my immense pleasure to welcome you on their behalf. Late Shri Jashwant Garde, in whose honor this lecture series started, was one of the founder members of CMI. The chamber was established in 1967 when Aurangabad was a tiny town with a population around 40,000 and hardly any industrial existence. Shri Jashwant Garde ji started his career as a teacher in a technical institution, was very passionate about teaching, and this passion continued throughout his lifetime uninterruptedly. The year was 1962 when he settled in Aurangabad and started a small-scale unit along with his parents, along with his partners, for fabrication of steel furniture and poultry equipment in a cooperative industrial estate. This cooperative industrial estate, apart from being unique and rare, was the first in Aurangabad and also in the state of Maharashtra, and is still functioning very successfully. Shri Garde ji has the honor of being the founder member of this industrial estate. Very soon after setting up this unit, he established his mettle in the market because of his innovativeness, hard work, and passion for quality. He was a rare visionary and a pioneer of the industrial culture that we all are witnessing today in Aurangabad. In fond memories of his late father, Mr. Ashish Garde mooted a proposal to Chamber of Marathwada Industries and Agriculture to start a lecture series, and the proposal CMI readily agreed to. India has emerged as a global economic and industrial power due to availability of skilled manpower with opportunities to move up the value chain through innovation. Innovation is the key factor, but it must percolate down to Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities rather than restricting itself to a few metros. This lecture series is on its way to fulfill its main objective of providing a platform for students, youth, and entrepreneurs, not only to inculcate but also ignite the spirit of entrepreneurship, education, and innovation. To achieve this objective of percolating innovation to grassroots level, it is proposed to have sustained efforts through a structural approach. Every year, four programs are proposed under this initiative. 2 will be lecture delivery by eminent personalities. 1 will be case study presentation in industrial innovation along with the keynote address. And 4th one will be presentation on innovation by students. The central theme for the lecture delivery will revolve around 4 things: idea, incubation, innovation, and inspiration. Eminent personalities of national and international repute in various fields will share their career journey, and I am sure this will not only motivate but also ignite minds of students, youth, and entrepreneurs to scale newer and newer heights in their business ventures. It is also proposed that each program will be partnered by 1 educational institution and 1 relevant organization along with CMI. For this program, it is CMI, MIT, and 1 Astha Foundation. I just let you know the brief of Astha Foundation. A group of young, dynamic, socially aware people with a dream of making positive change in society came together in 2007. The concept of this project and ideology was conceived, and Astha Foundation was established with a mission to make a positive difference in various areas of society. The brainstorming on social issues led this group's attention towards the problem and issues of the senior citizens. A detailed study in this area revealed that there is a need to address the issues pertaining to attention, comfort and care, love, dignity and respect to the senior citizens. Thus, the idea of establishing a center emerged and was named Vasanta Parva Visava. The center proposes to establish a residential housing and assisted living for the senior citizens. Friends, today we have with us not just an eminent personality, but an institution in itself, Dr. Anil Kakodkar. He does not need any introduction. However, I now invite Mr. Umesh Dashrathi, who is past president of Chamber, to put before you some salient feature of his persona that have made him an institution. Thank you very much.
Ashish Garde had decided to start this inspirational lecture series, Yashwant Inspirational Lecture Series, in the memory of his beloved father. And when it was consented by Dr. Anil Kakodkar to be present for this lecture, Ashish came to me and he told me that I have to take this responsibility of introduction. And I was really happy because you hardly have to do anything for introducing such a great personality. Almost everybody knows it. But then I received his biodata and I understood how difficult it is to introduce him. It's today probably most of us know him by atomic energy and the work that he had done in atomic energy. But honestly, it is one of the part of his total contribution to this country. I may take a little time for his introduction, but please pardon me on that. The biodata is such a heavy biodata, which we will surely understand after a complete introduction is over. Well, just to start, born in 1943, he joined the Bhabha Atomic Research Center in 1964. Then he topped one of a postgraduate training institute in nuclear science. He was director of BARC in the year 1996, chairman of Atomic Energy Commission in 2000, from 2000 to 2009. In the same period, he was Secretary of Government India, currently DAE and Homi Bhabha Chair Professor at BARC. And more of everything, he definitely dedicated his life for development of atomic energy development program in India. And developing atomic energy is a job of its kind. It's not that simple because it has a lot of international facets. So undeterred by the restrictions imposed by international forces, he was going on and going on. Sorry. He built Dhruv reactor from concept to completion. He developed various systems for pressurized heavy water reactor, which is one of the essential part for any kind of atomic energy. Complete rehabilitation of Madras Atomic Power Station Units 1 and 2. Concept and development of advanced heavy water reactor, key contribution for nation's strategy formation on atomic energy. He was involved in the first successful, peaceful nuclear explosion on May 18th, 1974 at Pokhran. I think at that point of time, many of us might be remembering Ani Buddha Hasla and Buddha laughed was probably the very, very famous code that was being developed for this nuclear test. Then also developed nuclear submarine power pack technology. Against uranium supply constraint, there was significant boost of nuclear power program and more than 10,000 megawatt generation of more than 10,000 megawatt electricity through nuclear energy, and which can be scaled up. By these efforts, India definitely has a distinctive status as a country with advanced nuclear technology. we are not only in the list of all nuclear technologies, but we have something more advanced which probably the other so-called developed nation do not have. This is not the only contribution that he has. He also has worked into in development of human resources, and he is associated with different institutions as in the capacity of chairman, member, director. These are few of the names of the institutions with which he is associated. The current key engagements that he has in energy sector, he is working with different national and international associations or institutions or various bodies. And those include Solar Energy Corporation of India, Solar Energy Research Advisory Council, and some international names like Westington House Advisory Council. He's a member on such a prestigious institution also. In education, there are right from IIT to various topmost institutions in India. He's helping in one way or other. In many of the cases, he is chairman. In many of the cases, he is one of the guiding force in educational institute. In societal development, again, all these things are national and international names in the in society reform. He is again working in the capacity of president or chairman or member, so on and so forth. Sorry. There are, apart from this academic and energy and other this thing, he is also a member of board of Reserve Bank of India. He is a member of Science and Engineering Research Board. He is chairman on Nalanda Dance Research Center Trust, and also member on board of directors of Garda Scientific Research Foundation. Various fellowships and honors, just to indicate, these are a few academic fellowships that he has: Indian National Academy of Engineering, Indian Academy of Sciences, National Academy of Sciences, and Maharashtra Academy of Sciences. These are various doctorates that he had he received in all this journey. So that was the reason why I was telling you that I will take a little time. These are I am sure these are few of them. On other professional affiliations, he is honorary fellow for IIT Mumbai, fellow for Institution of Engineers India, trustee for Indian Nuclear Society, and honorary fellow for Institution of Electronics and Telecommunication Engineers. Padma Awards, there is no other Padma Award, so there are only 3. And I am sure, sir, next year you will definitely visit, and I am sure you must have bagged Bharat Ratna also till that time. Various international recognitions. These are the recognitions of its kind. Very few Indians have really reached to this level of getting so many international recognitions in various fields. Various fields on global level. Now, just hold on for a while. There are some few of the national recognitions and honors that he has bagged. So this is few of them. This is few of them. So this is a personality with whom we are going to talk today. I request Honorable President of CMIA and Mr. Munish Sharma to escort Honorable Kakodkar sir for So please give him a big round of applause. I request Ashish to escort Honorable Vice Chancellor sir. Now I request Honorable Vice Chancellor sir to felicitate Sri Anilji Kakodkar with a floral bouquet. Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot. And now I hand over the dais to Dr. Anil Kakodkar. I request you to again give a big round of applause for a person.
Thank you for such elaborate introduction. I'm seeing such an introduction first time myself. And I feel little guilty that you have a PowerPoint for introduction and I have no PowerPoint for my lecture. Well, all members of the Chamber of Marathwada Industries and Agriculture, distinguished invitees, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, let me express my gratitude for this, I would say, very wonderful opportunity, and from whatever little I know of Marathwada, I think you are a unique conglomerate. I have seen several chambers, but I haven't seen a chamber of industry and agriculture. Very important in Indian context. I was seeing a presentation while coming here, and certainly you seem to be in a of course, cluster is a very popular word, but you seem to be in a cluster of opportunities. There are plenty of strong motivations for encashing several new opportunities that this area presents. And so, what I wish to do is to just share some random ideas about moving towards an innovation society, which I'm sure, I don't have to tell you, all of you would agree that this is crucially important for our future. Before that, let me also spell out my the background from where I come in the context of innovation. See, in atomic energy, of course, that's a program which is based on self-reliant and indigenous research and development to develop a whole technology. In terms of the power seen in the country, it may not be very large, but still for you to appreciate the Nuclear Power Corporation, which runs around 20 nuclear power plants in the country and produces roughly around 5,500 megawatts, has been a AAA rated company by CRISIL for, I think, now a few decades. So the fact is, we have an enterprise of that order with a significant internal reserve generated out of business, all triggered out of in-house indigenous research and development. So in fact, somebody introduced me to this term, intrapreneurship. Till that time, I only knew entrepreneurship. And so, in fact, I Googled it to find out what is interpretation. And then I realized that, there is so much of necessity for encouraging innovation right within an enterprise. And then I felt happy because that's what we have been doing in atomic energy. So that's my one dimension of the background with which I come. Secondly, I do take a lot of interest in higher technical education, and as a part of that, I have had an opportunity to look at higher education in Maharashtra. I had an opportunity to look at IIT system as a whole. Currently, I am looking at NIT system as a whole. And then I find that talking purely about education, we have a huge dichotomy, I would say. You have extremely good institutions and you have extremely bad institutions, and you produce young, capable people who do extremely well, create a brand for themselves and for the country, and then you produce millions of engineers. Most of them are unemployable. So this is another thing which... Thirdly, looking at education, it obviously forces, education is always preparation for tomorrow. So if you are looking at education today, you have to perforce visualize what is the shape of things to happen maybe 20, 30 years from now. And then it looks that the whole world is moving towards the quote-unquote knowledge economy, where several things are likely to go through a paradigm change. It's no longer, in fact, you made that mention in terms of how things are likely to evolve. The question is, are we really ready? And that's what I'm really wanting to focus on. But when you reflect on all these things, you have to, of course, ask several questions to yourselves. Are our children not bright? And the answer is, our children are very bright. There are n number of cases. I'm sure all of you also would have come across such cases in your own, within the familiar circles of your own, where there will be somebody who studies here, then suddenly you find that he has migrated somewhere else abroad, Western society, and then he or she, they start doing wonders. And then you wonder whether, is it the same boy or a girl whom we knew? We never knew is so capable. So as they say, or for that matter, you often hear these movements on locating innovative activities of people, not necessarily literate, even illiterate people. And there are several exams, sure, here also, if you have conducted or you decide to conduct, that let us spread our eyesight around and locate innovations wherever they are there and run an exhibition. You will look at huge number of examples where people have done wonderful innovation of their own. So clearly, I think there is innate, inherent capability in Indians, and most certainly in young people. In fact, people do describe India or Indians as a land of ideas or people with ideas, and that's an attribute which is certainly a big strong point for us. Then there is a question of translation of those ideas. Innovation is not just about idea, but it has to, you have to carry that idea through all the way up to something useful, something that generates wealth, something that generates benefit. And that's where I think the problem is. Some succeed, but most of them don't. And whenever they go outside, it almost appears as if they have moved to the land of opportunities. And the moment you give opportunities, they flourish. So, then you have to ask this question, why we are not a land of opportunities? Now, because if you are people a land of ideas, if you also become land of opportunities, I think creating an innovation society is no big deal, because that's what we need. Now, I'm sure all of you have answers to why we are not land of opportunities, but I want to go to a more fundamental view about this. I put it to you that this is a cultural problem. No point in telling that the government doesn't do this, or bureaucracy doesn't do this, or our system is like this. All these things are true. But I think fundamentally it's a cultural problem. And in order to overcome that cultural kind of constraint, we need to think through and see what are the corrective measures that are required, and that's what I want to now take to for a further debate. I say this, it's a cultural problem because we have, by tradition, we are, I think, great individual performance. But when it comes to group performance, there is some problem. Now, for innovations to flourish, you of course need, and now I want to restrict to that part of innovation which is based on new knowledge, or the knowledge acquired by new research, so that you, through your innovation based on new knowledge, you can translate an idea to a new product which comes out in the market first time ever, globally. And if you succeed on that, and if you are able to, if you succeed on that in doing it in a large number of cases, I would say we have really reached the innovation society. I told you about, you look at innovations around and you will find plenty of examples. But now if I ask you the same question, that how many of innovative products we have been able to bring out in the in the society or in the market, which are completely new, nobody has thought about, or there is nothing anywhere closer to that in the market globally. A simple example is, whenever mobile came on the scene first time, that was a game changer innovation. Like that. And then you will find that we are not very successful in that kind of innovation. And the reason for that, as I said earlier, is cultural. Of course, it's true in other cases also, but I want to focus on this new technology products coming out of local innovation. For that to happen, I think we require, of course, you require a domain, an ecosystem where you, of course, have to have young people. Most fertile minds are young people, so you have to have young people. You have to have a knowledge environment where you can leverage whatever is new knowledge that one wants to exploit. You have got to have the skills to translate knowledge, particularly the new knowledge acquisitions out of your research. You need to have skills to translate that into products, into technology. And then you need entrepreneurs in the same environment so that there is connectivity between somebody who would take that idea, take that technology to marketplace. And when you have an ecosystem where people can network, depending on individual case by case innovation, people can network, then I would say you create or you have created a productive innovation ecosystem. Now contrast that with a situation where if I have done, let's say, or take my own case, if I had done Bachelor of Engineering in Mechanical Engineering, and I'm telling you a real life story. I did this from VJTI. Institute of Chemical Technology is just across the road. I used to go there every day for taking my lunch in their canteen. But when it came to my pursuing further studies in a subject like heat transfer or fluid flow, which is common between mechanical engineering and chemical engineering, for example. Now, at that time, that institution was a part of Faculty of Technology. The Vice Chancellor is here, so he can appreciate this problem very well. VJTI was Faculty of Engineering. And I found n number of bureaucratic processes for some student from Faculty of Engineering to change faculty and pursue further studies in Faculty of Technology. In our own place in atomic energy, if you want somebody, let's say somebody with a PhD degree in some area, we would look at it, what was his MSc about, what was his BSc about, and we by and large, of course of late we have started making exceptions, and by and large we would look at the fact that the individual should be belonging to a particular stream. I should be able to label him. He is a physics fellow, he is a chemistry fellow, he is a biology fellow. If a student who has done BSc in physics and wants to pursue MSc in chemistry, impossible. Now contrast that with the needs of problem solving. You want to solve a problem, or you want to create a technology product to address a problem. Now that problem doesn't recognize what is physics, what is chemistry. Problem is a problem, and every piece of knowledge that you need to bring to bear on that must be possible. So there are two alternatives. Either I must learn additional disciplines and subjects, and I should be in a position to learn that. Or I should be able to team up. I should be able to collaborate with somebody else who belongs to other discipline, and then of course we should be able to address all the interface issues. Sometimes I have to, as a part of that, I should be able to interact with industry. So I should be able to go and spend time in industry. Or for that matter, some industry person interested in such development should be able to come and spend time in the university. I know it has started happening, but if you look at most of the advanced universities, this is very common. I have seen students moving from physics to dentistry to biology. BSc, MSc, PhD. We have Nobel laureate, Indian, Venki, who has done chemistry, biology, has moved from discipline. When it comes to the student wanting to participate in this development. Now, if I'm in an environment where everybody around me is in the same discipline as what subject I'm pursuing, I would probably learn that subject better. I could probably get ideas to carry that subject forward, and that also is innovation. But it will be very difficult for me to convert that knowledge into a product. Let's take another case. For example, this question of skills. The skill, and there is a huge emphasis on skill development in the country today, the major mission. You ask which ministry is responsible for doing it. In central government, it is the Ministry of Industry. So Ministry of Human Resource Development would think that they have nothing to do with skills. On the other hand, skill is construed to be a blue-collar job. Now, what about skills which are required? Supposing you have a hypothesis and you want to prove or disprove by doing an experiment for which an instrument is not available because nobody has thought about it, nor there is a commercial kind of market for such an instrument, because this will be one-off. You want to do one experiment, you build one experimental setup, carry out that experiment, you have proved or disproved, and job is over. We don't teach skills to build such experimental setups to our researchers. So now, the same researcher, if he gets an idea, how is he going to translate his ability to a product, his idea to a product? And so I think, as I said, and I must very clearly tell you that there is no use blaming this on the system. I think if you really even if the system corrects, it's our habits which don't allow. I'll tell you an example. When I was the chairman of Atomic Energy Commission, I was quite concerned about mobility of people, scientists, researchers. See, in atomic energy, we have institutions like BARC, We have institutions like BARC, Indira Gandhi. These are all technology institutions. They have, I think, very high level of credentials into creating new technologies. And we have companies, Electronics Corporation of India, Nuclear Power Corporation, Uranium Corporation, which do business. And I told you that we have translated R&D into the commercial enterprise. So naturally, if you want to take your research to the industrial domain, there must be handholding. Somebody who has done a piece of research which has to be now converted to technology and implemented in a company. It should be possible for the individual to go to that company, spend some time, 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, do some handholding, because technology transfer, traditional method is you write an MOU and you sign the MOU, exchange the document, that means technology is transferred. It doesn't happen like that. There has to be that handholding. So I did a lot of talking. I had good bureaucrat colleagues, so they agreed. So I think we were quite unique. Department of Environment were quite unique. We, in fact, I issued an order saying if somebody has to move from one place to another place for such purposes, the individual will not be uprooted from his original place. He will continue to draw his salary. His family will continue to stay where he belongs to. His children will continue to go to school. And at the other place where the individual has to go for technology transfer, you create some little support system for him to stay, live. And you keep that support system all till such time the individual is the other place. And I thought I had done a wonderful thing in terms of enabling mobility of scientists. I was in the system for 3 more years after that. How many people would have moved according to you? 1. So the point I'm trying to make to you is it is not necessarily the fault of system. It's a part of the cultural correction. And I think we need to run an extra mile to make that cultural change happen. This is the first point that I wish to make, that you need an ecosystem where there are opportunities for a knowledge domain. And knowledge domain, in my way of things, it includes everything. It includes teaching all the way up to the frontiers of that subject, frontiers of knowledge in that subject, research and development that pushes those frontiers, entrepreneurship, which kind of make use of that new knowledge, convert it into technologies and carry it into the marketplace or society. And it's very difficult. There are some people who can manage all these domains together, and such people have in fact succeeded. But by and large, this would require a diverse set of people to work together to take an innovation forward. And wherever such a thing has happened, I can assure you the success rates are very high. I'm quite sure amongst you also you would have found some such examples. But the point is, as a system, we need to be able to do this on a much larger scale than what we are doing. Now, having said that, the next question was, how do I, my goodness, 350. How do I break these barriers? So So we kind of created an institution called Homi Bhabha National Institute. Here, it's deemed to be a university, essentially for pursuing PhD level research. And it, of course, encourages all kinds of research with a fairly broad viewpoint. But a special emphasis on research on the interface of basic science and technology. You know, we talk about multidisciplinary research, which is of course very important. But over and above that, I think it's important that we need to create a breed of people who would be able to take the latest knowledge in a given subject and convert it into technology. Let me give you an example why it is important. And again, I'll give you an example from something which I am familiar with. Take case of energy technologies. We are all used to this fact that, okay, you have coal-fired power station, hydro power stations, and you teach them in engineering, full-fledged subject. So you produce engineers who can design such plants, who can manufacture such plants, who can erect such plants, who can operate such plants. So there is a end-to-end capability. On the other extreme, take the case of energy technologies of future, for example, fusion energy. Or take the case of energy technologies which are based on accelerators, which are based on lasers, which are based on plasma. Now, you don't teach these subjects in engineering colleges. So the engineers coming out of this, they will be able to do nothing about this. In the science stream, you do teach them. They know what lasers are, they know what accelerators are, they know what plasma is. But they don't know how to engineer things. So they can probably give you a lecture, make you understand the science behind it. But translating that into engineering product is quite another thing. So I think this gap is very large. And we don't allow a student from physics to do engineering or student from engineering to do physics. Except I think a few institutions, I know in IIT it happens, but people who go abroad, they very regularly do engineering in for example, mechanical engineering and go abroad and do PhD in physics, chemistry. There are n number of examples of that kind. But in absence of such a facility, we are unlikely to have people who would be able to manage technology of tomorrow. And so we said, okay, let's emphasize this research on the interface of basic sciences and technology. Then the question is, how do you get guides? If you want to have some PhD level work on that, you won't get guides. So I said, okay, this individual student will work under 2 guides. And of course, everybody told me, you are making the life of student very difficult. But the idea was that you make a beginning, and then over a period of time, when you have such PhDs, once they come out in sufficient numbers, then they will be the guides for future students, and you can create a new breed of people who can bridge this gap. And there are many such gaps that we need to bridge in our system. And now this has started happening. The Homi Bhabha National Institute is one example. I think a few institutions and universities have in fact started doing this. But this is one of the very fundamental reasons why it is not. Let me take a step further. Your Chamber of Industries, and I would imagine you have members who are, some are small industry, some are medium industry, some are large industry. A good number of them, and particularly the MSME sector, and I'm talking about those industries which were set up maybe 50 years ago. A good number of them got hold of technology from somewhere and started producing things. And they have done great contribution in terms of employment, great contribution in terms of export earning, so on and so forth. But then over a period of time, a fairly large number of them have, now they find that their technology is obsolete. Either because some new products have come into the market, or because there are new environmental laws have come in, so they are not able to compete, or some such thing.